Good morning. I'm Whit Johnson in New York. We're coming on the air with major breaking news from the U.S. Supreme Court on the final day of its term. The High Court has just issued one of its most consequential rulings in recent decades, a decision that not only affects the 2024 race for president following last week's contentious debate, but also the future of the presidency itself from this day forward. Moments ago, the justices ruling on Donald Trump's claim of absolute immunity from criminal prosecution, his core argument in both the 2020 election interference case in Washington, D.C., and the classified documents case in Florida. The court deciding this morning presidents do have immunity for official acts, but there is no immunity for non-official acts. The court then sending it back to the lower courts. So let's get right out to ABC's senior national correspondent, Terry Moran, at the Supreme Court. And Terry, as we noted, this goes far beyond former President Donald Trump, but presidents in the future.
Absolutely. This is a ruling, the biggest ruling on presidential power in decades. All future presidents will have to reckon with it. And it is a 43-page opinion that basically says there's more work to be done in this prosecution at the lower level. But the court did, as you suggest, have to outline the big question. Donald Trump's claim that former presidents are absolutely immune from prosecution, can never be prosecuted for any of their official acts. And in this case, the court says that a former president may have some immunity from criminal prosecution for official acts during his tenure in office. And then comes the fine print. And what the court does here is steps through each of the actions of former President Trump in his alleged conspiracy to overthrow the 2020 election. His conversations with Mike Pence, pressuring Mike Pence. His conversations with Justice Department officials, pressuring them. His conversations with state officials, and his speech on January 6th. And in each instance, the court takes a look, raises the issues, and sends it back down to the trial court to figure out, under this guidance, is Trump immune on each of those areas of evidence in this prosecution? What it means is a lot more work at the trial court and a lot more delay for this trial. We'll take a deeper look at it, but that's the basic outline. Trump does not have absolute immunity. He can be prosecuted, but it depends on how the lower court looks at this opinion in each of those very fact-specific areas.
Terry, thank you. And stand by here. Let's bring in our senior Washington reporter, Devin Dwyer, who's also been following this. And Devin, it's worth going back to some of these oral arguments in April, because we to a degree saw some of this coming, with the justices already suggesting presidents need some immunity. So how does this now play out going forward?
Well, this is in no short sense, Whit, a big win for Donald Trump. It means delay. We already knew that a trial on these charges would be unlikely before the presidential election. Now it's all but impossible based on today's decision. And I want to just quote for you from the dissent here. This is a Supreme Court that is sharply divided on this issue along ideological lines. This was a 6-3 decision. The conservatives issuing that decision that Terry just outlined. The liberals in this case dissenting very, very sharply in stark language. In fact, Justice Sonia Sotomayor said today that the court gives Donald Trump all the immunity that he asked for and more. She accuses the court of an atextual, ahistorical, and unjustifiable immunity test that, in her view, puts the president above the law. So as much as many court observers had hoped that this court would somehow try to find a decision that would unify on their bench in the country, they did not do that here, and this is a sharply divided opinion.
All right, Devin, thank you. Let's come back here in the studio with our chief Washington correspondent, John Carl, who's with me here at the desk. And we were talking about this earlier, because this is not just about the January 6th case. There's the documents case and other charges. And there's been a lot of frustration from Democrats and those who would like to see the former president held accountable. More delays ahead now.
Look, this is an absolute win for Donald Trump, not just the substance of the opinion, but also the court had the option here to make the decision effective immediately, or go through a traditional waiting period of 25 days. There's no expedited period. This effectively grants Donald Trump blanket immunity, because it makes it seems to me now, impossible for a trial to go forward, either in the classified documents case, because this is also at stake there, and the January 6th case. And I think when you look at the dissenting opinion, Devin read part of it. This line stands out to me. It says the decision, quote, makes a mockery of the principle foundational to our Constitution and system of government that no man is above the law. Now, look, this decision doesn't say that what Trump did in his effort to overturn the election is covered by this immunity, but it would take time. It's going to take time that simply isn't there, and you have an election coming up, and you have Donald Trump has made it abundantly clear that if he wins this election, this case goes away.
And the timing is so key here. And I do want to put that graphic back up on the screen. We were listing out the various charges because now the special counsel would have to take another look at all of this. That's the graphic there, the Trump criminal trials and the charges there. Let's bring in Rachel Scott, our senior congressional correspondent. Also, you've been out on the campaign trail. Rachel, you were there on January 6th. You've also been following closely what the Trump campaign is saying. And even this morning, he's been following this, and he's been posting things on social media and even deflecting and saying, it's not that big of a deal for me. Maybe it's something Joe Biden should worry about when it comes to presidential immunity.
And I'm told from a senior advisor to the Trump campaign that we are expecting a statement from the former president at any moment now. Actually, we just got it. The former president says that this is a big win for our Constitution and democracy. Proud to be an American. That is the first reaction coming in from Donald Trump to this ruling today. Out on the campaign trail, he has made retribution a core part of his message. We saw it on the debate stage just days ago. He said that this would have big implications not only for him, but also for future presidents, including President Biden, saying that in the future, President Biden could also have to be faced with something very similar to this. There is no question about it. As John Carl just noted, this is big for Donald Trump because time is something that his campaign, that the former president, were deeply worried about. They did not want to see this trial happen any closer to Election Day, Whit.
And can I just make one very quick point? So while it is an absolute total victory for Donald Trump in the legal sense, the court does not affirm what Trump has been saying on the campaign trail. Trump has been saying that presidents have absolute immunity for anything, that you cannot charge a president or a former president for anything that happened while he or she was president. But the court does say, in the opinion, there is no immunity for unofficial acts. The president is not above the law. The issue here is that it's going to take time to adjudicate what is or is not an official act in the case against him.
Yeah, and sort all of that out. Absolutely, will take time. Let's go to the White House. Our senior White House correspondent, Selena Wang, is there. And Selena, you're already getting response from the Biden administration. We know in the past, President Biden has said he can't see any reason why a president would have absolute immunity. What are they saying now?
Yeah, Whit, that's right. And for the Biden campaign, this case underscores the core theme of President Biden's re-election, the stakes of this, their message that Trump is a threat to democracy, someone who is obsessed with power. And in a statement that they just sent over, they said, look, today's ruling does not change the facts, so let's be very clear about what happened on January 6th. Donald Trump snapped after he lost the 2020 election and encouraged a mob to overthrow the results of a free and fair election. Trump is already running for president as a convicted felon. Now, the campaign, Whit, has also been warning that if Trump gets a second term, there will only be darker days ahead, that he will continue to try and shield himself from prosecution. With this campaign has been saying now for quite some time that Trump wants the power of a king or a monarch, to have absolute power without accountability. So the Supreme Court decision today does not change their messaging on those points.
All right, Selena Wang for us. Thank you so much. I want to bring in Kate Shaw, our Supreme Court contributor. And Kate, I think it's worth, again, going back to some of these oral arguments in April, because the justices laid out just how important and consequential this is. Justice Neil Gorsuch said, we're writing a rule for the ages. Justice Kavanaugh said the court's decision would have implications for the future of the presidency and the future of the country. So now that we're looking at all of this now, have we answered some of those questions about what would be an official act that a president could have immunity from and what wouldn't?
Well, Whit, I think it's definitely right that this is an opinion the court has written for the ages. It's probably the most important Supreme Court opinion about the power of the presidency and protections enjoyed by the president since Nixon versus United States, almost exactly 50 years ago. So that was a July 1974 opinion. And the court in that case rejected Richard Nixon's arguments that he didn't have to cooperate and produce Oval Office tapes. Many of his arguments echoed in lots of ways arguments made by former President Trump here. So that case was a unanimous loss for the former president. president. This case is not unanimous, but a very big win for former President Trump, recognizing for the first time this sort of immunity of ex-presidents from criminal prosecution, not for everything they do, as John Carl was saying. So unofficial acts are still subject to prosecution, but recognizing this kind of immunity, some absolute immunity for core presidential functions, some qualified immunity for other official acts, that seems to be what the opinion says, is an enormous addition of new powers and protections to the president in a way we just haven't seen before. So I think the dissent is quite right to say this is a seismic opinion, and in many ways it is hard to square with previous constitutional decisions.
And Kate, just to follow up on that and to see how this plays out in the lower court now, you talked about the hypotheticals. I mean, the justices were bringing up everything from what if a president stages a coup? What if a president assassinates a rival? So how do those questions get answered moving forward?
You know, I think that all of that, right? So the lower courts initially will take a look at what's in Jack Smith's allegation, right? Some of what is alleged having to do with the vice president or the Department of Justice, pretty likely or definitely official conduct. Other things, right, trying to generate fake slates of electors, that is probably on the unofficial side of the ledger. So as to the conduct at issue here, the courts will be examining closely how this new test applies. But those hypotheticals, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that some of those very, very extreme hypotheticals would fall on the official side of the line. If you're the president and you're ordering even unlawful action by subordinates, that's acting in your official capacity. Only the president can do that. And so I think it's pretty clear that this case has blessed the idea that some of that conduct, really extreme conduct, would be subject to immunity forever if engaged in by a president. And I think that's, you know, that's why the stakes of this case are so high.
All right, thank you. Let's bring in ABC News investigative reporter Catherine Faulders. Catherine, I know you've been talking to Trump's legal team and all of this. They were focused on this case, not just, again, about the January 6th case, but also the documents case. What's their reaction today?
Right. I was just on the phone with a source close to Trump's legal team, and the quote that they gave me, and they're still reading through this just like us, but they say this is as good as it could possibly be without absolute immunity. Obviously, that's for the reasons that we've been discussing. This is a very detailed opinion. They're focused on some of the language in this opinion that single out Trump's words, for example. Obviously, Mike Pence, as we've also been talking about. But this is something that maybe they predicted, but didn't predict that it would go this much in their favor. Now, of course, they didn't find absolute immunity, but this essentially stalls this. There likely won't be a trial before the election. There will be a lot of litigation at the D.C. District Court down the street. But they also are focused on the fact that this could affect Florida. Remember, the judge there has essentially stalled the proceedings in Florida. That's the classified documents case. The Trump lawyers filed a motion there based on presidential immunity. They want the case thrown out. They say that Trump was immune in the classified boxes case because when he landed in Florida, he was still president, and therefore that's an official act. Now, the judge there will likely schedule hearings as well in this. The judge, Judge Cannon, who oversees that, appointed by Trump, has indicated that she wants to wait to rule on that immunity motion until the Supreme Court weighed in. Well, they have. We could likely see hearings down in Florida on this as well.
All right, Catherine, thank you. Let's go back to Terry Moran at the Supreme Court. You're getting more information on sort of the practical implications here.
Precisely how this decision works. There's a big principle that we've already articulated that Chief Justice Roberts expresses this way. The president enjoys no immunity for his unofficial acts, and not everything the president does is official. The president is not above the law, but he goes on to say, Congress may not criminalize the president's conduct in carrying out the responsibilities of the executive branch, and the president therefore may not be prosecuted for exercising core constitutional powers and is entitled to presumptive immunity. That means the trial court, each time the special counsel says, well, we want to prosecute him for this act or that act, we'll have to presume the starting point of the analysis is that the president is immune. And the court actually did some work in that regard on one instance. In December of 2020, President Trump, in the late at night, called in the Deputy Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen and other officials and pressured him to get on board with the Trump campaign and challenge results in Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Michigan, and Rosen refused, and Trump threatened to fire him. The court says that is core constitutional protected presidential activity. And it says, what Chief Justice Roberts says is that because as president, Donald Trump can fire anybody he wants in the executive branch, that cannot be criminalized, even if it was done as the allegation is in the prosecution's case, to further a conspiracy to overthrow the results. Because it's firing an executive branch official or demanding action by an executive branch official, it cannot be criminalized. So he totally wins on that count at the Supreme Court, and the lower court is going to have to deal with a very high bar that the court establishes here to prosecute a president.
And Terry, laying out some of those specific examples, that will be key as we move ahead here. Terry, thank you. I do want to bring in our Chief Justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas, because, Pierre, this decision is going to impact the credibility of the DOJ and the special counsel. So how do they approach this going forward now? Do they re-examine some of these charges?
Well, clearly today, this means that the likelihood of a trial before the November election is almost impossible. And based on conversation with DOJ officials, I expect to happen is the following. The judge and DOJ have a lot of work ahead of them. The bottom line for DOJ, they will have to look at each aspect, each part of the case that they brought. And one of the things I talked about earlier with sources is that they may make the case that when Donald Trump took these actions, he was not acting as president, he was acting as candidate. And we will have to see if that's effective with the judge in terms of parsing through each individual aspect of the case. But clearly, DOJ will have to make some of the most significant decisions they've made since bringing the case. And at the end of the day, DOJ has to resolve this issue. They decided that Donald Trump, as president, was acting as a criminal. They charged him. Now they have to break this down again, present it to the judge, and see if they can go forward with the case.
All right, Pierre, thank you. Let's go back to Devin Dwyer in Washington. And Devin, again, it is important to point this out to our viewers. This is very confusing, right? We had a lower court say one thing, the Supreme Court says something else, Trump's team and the DOJ all saying something different. So bear with us as we dissect this in real time. But you're getting more detail about the specific charges here, right?
Well, the top lines that we've been talking about, that this being a very good day for Donald Trump in terms of the timing of any potential prosecution is very significant and historic, as we've been laying out. But the Supreme Court makes clear by writings by Chief Justice John Roberts that in no way is this a free pass for Donald Trump. Yes, the court, as Terry was just saying, gave explicit absolute immunity in writing for the former president's conversations with the Justice Department. But John Roberts writes at length in this opinion, laying out what is still fair game. Yes, this will take time for the lower court to parse what is immune, what is not immune, what's official, what's unofficial. But Roberts explicitly said that the former president's interactions with Mike Pence, pressuring him on the certification of results, the former president's contact with state officials, private parties, Rudy Giuliani and others, comments to the general public on Twitter on January 6th, all of that could potentially be prosecutable, John Roberts says. And in fact, he pushes back on the dissent who said this decision puts former President Trump above the law, and John Roberts writes that they have concluded a wholly disproportionate judgment on what the court says today. And John Roberts says there's still a lot of work to be done, but a trial can ultimately go forward, just not anytime soon.
All right, Devin, thank you. Let's come back to the studio and bring in John Carl again, because I want to dig into the documents case a little bit more. The documents were taken while he was president. He held them at Mar-a-Lago after he was president, famously saying they're mine.
Yep.
So how does that factor in all of this?
So as you heard Catherine Falders point out, the Trump legal team has argued because he took the documents while he was president. In fact, when he landed at Palm Beach, he was still president, that this is an official act, having the documents. But that's not what he's charged with. He's charged with refusing to return the documents. He's charged with obstruction of justice. He's charged with failure to comply with a subpoena.
After he was president.
Long after he was president. This all happened, as you remember, the search warrant in Mar-a-Lago was in August of 2022. And all of these, and you remember the details of the case against him, the way they moved the boxes around to effectively try to hide them, the way he allegedly tried to destroy the surveillance video that showed the documents being moved and being hidden. So I think that certainly it's something they're arguing, and the judge in that case, Elaine Canyon, has said that she'll have a hearing on this, was waiting for this case to play out to the Supreme Court. But to be clear, the allegations in the classified documents case are not related to Donald Trump's official actions while he was president of the United States. They're things that happened long after he was president.
And Rachel Scott, again, it's worth emphasizing once more, a delay is a win for Trump.
Yes. Political versus dismantling the allegations are two completely different things here. So yes, this is a political win for Donald Trump in the sense that his campaign, the former president, does not want to see this go to trial before the election. But this does not mean that there's no credibility to any of the allegations against the former president. And when we're talking about the classified documents, I was just looking at my notes here, was on the plane with the former president back in June, traveling with him. I asked him directly if he had any regrets in the way in which he handled those classified documents. He told me flat out no. He has no regrets whatsoever, claiming that it was all simply bravado.
All right, Rachel Scott, John Carl, thank you. I do want to go back to Terry Moran at the Supreme Court. Terry, just give us the big picture here. We've had a little bit more time to dissect this decision. What's the big takeaway here?
Well, with this was the first case like it in the court's history, a case of first impression, as they say. And it was going to define presidential power, not just for Donald Trump, but for future presidents, no matter how it came out. And it came out in a way that will empower presidents in the future to act, as the majority in this case says, with boldness and fearless impartiality. And it will also embolden presidents to act right up to and perhaps beyond the bounds of the criminal law. The last words of Justice Sonia Sotomayor, disagreeing with what the court did here, is that never in the history of our republic has a president had reason to believe that he would be immune from criminal prosecution. Moving forward, however, all former presidents will be cloaked in such immunity. If the occupant of that office misuses official power for personal gain, the criminal law that the rest of us must abide by will not provide a backstop. That's the concern.
All right, Terry Moran, thank you. Let's go back to John Carl here again as we're reading more of this decision. We have the political implications here as well. And you were referencing a specific incident that's getting a lot of attention.
Yeah, you remember when the argument came before the court, this example was given about SEAL Team 6. If a president ordered SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political opponent, would that be immune? And Trump's lawyers said yes, it would be, unless the president was first impeached and then tried. So it's interesting to read the dissent here. Again, Sotomayor writing the dissent, saying the president of the United States is the most powerful person in the country and possibly the world. When he uses his official powers in any way under the majority's reasoning, he is now insulated from criminal prosecution. And then she goes through examples. Orders the Navy's SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival, immune. Organizes a military coup to hold on to power, immune. Takes a bribe in exchange for a pardon, immune, immune, immune. That's how Sotomayor sees the implications of this decision.
And again, that decision along ideological lines there with the 3 liberal justices, teaming together and the 6 conservative justices with that decision. Rachel Scott, also want to talk about all of this coming, of course, after that consequential debate that happened last week. Politically, according to polls and people who were watching, it appeared that obviously President Biden had a poor performance, but many thought that Donald Trump won the debate despite the cascade of false statements that were made. But this is a good couple of weeks for former President Trump as he heads towards the convention.
Yeah, you have the debate, you have this ruling coming down. We know the former president is going to campaign on this as a complete and total victory. We obviously differentiated between the two realities of that, both politically and also just the weight of these allegations against the former president. But also, just to make absolutely clear here, the former president's about to be sentenced in just a number of days. And so there's still a lot to be said about the legal challenges that Donald Trump faces.
And the former president did get a big boost in fundraising after that conviction as well. So we'll see how the rest of this plays out. Rachel Scott, John Carl, our entire team, thank you so much. Again, we're going to return you to regular programming. For some of you, that's Good Morning America in some parts of the country. Our coverage does continue here on ABC News Live and abcnews.com. You can also get breaking news alerts on the ABC News app. The entire team, again, will be right back here tonight for World News Tonight.